Our new series, Common Ground, highlights people who are setting aside partisan differences and solving problems. While common ground may be hard to find in Washington, it's alive and well elsewhere in the country, across the U.S. Up to 80 million acres of national forest face the risk of a catastrophic fire, and more than 46 million homes are in areas that could be engulfed by flames. Former Arizona Senator and CBS News contributor Jeff Flake went to his home state to look at an unprecedented effort to tackle wildfires. He met with unlikely allies who are uniting to save Arizona's forests. Jeff, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Arizona's Forest Restoration Initiative, or FORFRI, is by far the largest effort of its kind in the nation. The late Senator John McCain and I were early supporters of the project, which spans 4 national forests. It took decades for various interest groups to come together, and it all began with a devastating wildfire and an odd couple pairing.
Still left a few trees right there.
Stretching almost continuously from the Grand Canyon to New Mexico and into the White Mountains here in eastern Arizona. This is the largest ponderosa pine forest in the world. Imposing as it may be, much of it is unhealthy.
Wow, chimney left. That's a nice looking chimney.
For nearly 20 years, environmentalist Ethan Almack has worked to restore these forests. He runs the Grand Canyon Trust.
Well, I would represent those who didn't have a voice, whether that be Mexican spotted owl or other wildlife species.
As Almack puts it, he speaks for the owls.
I'm a registered independent, but I'm about as left-leaning as they come on many issues.
Well, you notice even while we're talking, I'm leaning to the right and on my left, right? So, been very conservative, grew up in a very conservative household. This is an area that was treated.
David Tenney's family has owned sawmills for more than a century, and then came the timber wars of the 1990s.
Your family getting out of the business, was that by choice, or what happened there?
No, absolutely not. Here, the fighting basically started over the Mexican spotted owl. There was an environmental movement that was trying to get the Forest Service to change the logging practices.
So at that point, there was a lot of animosity. In 1993, the environmental community put forward a lawsuit suggesting that the Mexican spotted owl needed additional protections. The courts agreed, and that logging ceased.
Then, in 2002, the Rodeo Chetasky fire blazed across nearly 500,000 acres of Arizona's forest.
It shut down the economy to the entire region for pretty much the whole summer. It caused everybody to step back and say, wait a minute, we can't do this. We can't keep doing nothing.
There needed to be broad community support for going back out into the woods and doing the right thing. No one could be left out.
After decades of distrust, Almack and Tenney and dozens of other stakeholders started hammering out a deal to restore the forests.
What did you think when you think of people like Ethan here, people on the environmental side?
You know, there was a time I wouldn't have given you dynamite to blow them all to smithereens. I really wouldn't have.
What were the main impediments from your perspective?
Well,
Trust.
From our perspective, trust was an impediment.
It was never going to go back to the big timber, right, to the way we knew it, but it didn't have to just burn either.
They agreed that the forests were far too thick with trees and needed to be thinned. So they set out to restore 2.4 million acres of dense national forests.
We've also agreed that most of the trees that need to be taken out are small, and that we're going to leave the larger and older trees as is. Fires burn through these forests very frequently.
If there are more trees closer together,
That's right.
then it becomes a crown fire, which is what?
When you get hundreds and sometimes thousands of trees per acre, fire will run continuously through those trees. And it's really quite difficult, usually impossible, to control that fire once it's running through the canopy, especially with strong winds driving it.
Well, they look busy here.
Yeah.
Some industry has returned to these woods.
My grandpa would always say those weigh 16 ounces to the pound.
But David Tenney has left the logging business and moved into government. He's the newly minted director of Arizona's Forestry Department.
The fact that the two of you can sit down, sit across the table, given your background and where you came from, should that say something to the country?
Yeah, I think it should.
I trust Dave implicitly to represent my interests in the best way he can, and vice versa. And beyond that trust, we have a friendship.
Still, this is federal land with all the bureaucracy that entails. Since 2010, Fry has only thinned about 113,000 acres, falling well short of its annual goal of 50,000 acres.
We have been supporting the Forest Service and pressuring the Forest Service to do what it needs to do.
In Washington, we're obviously always consumed budget time, appropriations process, and the difficulty has been to appropriate enough money to fight fires and still have enough money to prevent fires.
Exactly. Jeff, the studies have shown that it's about 10 times more expensive per acre to put out the fire than to treat the acreage ahead of time.
So this work makes sense economically, it makes sense for the communities, it makes sense for the forest, for the environment. It's a win-win-win-win-win.
The key is that they are working together to get to scale and to attract more industry to the forest, something that would have been unimaginable just a few years ago. As for the U.S. Forest Service, in a statement to CBS News, it says, quote, "It is focused on continued work to restore healthy, resilient landscapes and watersheds that provide for local livelihoods and valued products."
Well, this is one example, right, of where people can solve problems if they just would agree on some things, basic principles or values, right?
That's right. Well, to have these groups, environmentalists and the logging industry, to sit down at the same table and to agree to something substantive is really, really something.
I like what he said, a win-win-win-win-win. Senator, I'm dying to know, how did you feel about your first piece being on the other side of the camera?
Well, it was nice to be comfortable right in Arizona.
Yeah.
Hometown, so it was nice, and you all have been so great. Thank you.
Well done, well done. I know
right.
there is more to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you.